one of the most important things to understand is that you need to be able to give yourself permission to say no. If you want to walk on water, first you got to step out of the boat. Understanding what's the preference and what's the priority helps you stay on track. So when you become aware of that and you can get yourself into that state of calm, focused attention and how become more than all your parts by tapping into that super ego, man, that's powerful stuff.
Dave, welcome to Creative Expression.
Mate, Creative Expression, love it.
It's the name of the podcast.
Well
Excited
done,
to
mate.
bring it together.
That is brilliant.
Yeah,
love that.
Yeah, thank you very much. We've known each other for probably over 25 years.
If not longer.
If not longer, yeah.
If not longer.
And we met through a process of a sales call together. Yeah. And you're going through re-evaluating your pathway in the trades that you're working in.
I wouldn't say re-evaluating. I think I was in the process of creating the exit strategy to really pivot to what I really wanted to be doing.
Yes. And
I think how we met was you and I tag teamed on a printing job.
Yes.
I think it was for Trends Publishing, which ironically I've worked with that company and their staff as a coach for close to 25 years also.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's amazing the connections that you make with people and how some connections can make a massive difference in your life. You know, and I know that you would probably be really interested in this because you and I can both agree that we can appreciate the law of attraction. You know, how we connected, eh?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
we
from
connected,
day one.
And from day one. And I think at that stage it was you were a budding young sales rep for Action Mail, and I think you tag team with me to sort of get these big deals. But I think even you've got to appreciate how far you've come in 25 years. You know, from a young lad who was, young, looking at getting married, you know what I mean? And I know that things have moved on since then. But they were pretty powerful time, man. It was a pretty special time for us both.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time for me. I had the situation where I was working in a production environment in the family business, and I saw that we needed to pick things up. And I thought, well, the thing I have to do next in the business is I have to move into sales. I thought, okay, I could do that. And then I realized, like walking along the side of a cliff and finding out that you're afraid of heights, that I was literally afraid to talk to people. And it really freaked me out. I'd sweat, I would get nervous. And we got talking and you recognized that in me. And that's when you got talking about, you know, the pathway you're going on. And I was immediately curious about it. And I think at that time you were finalizing your NLP practitioner.
I had finished it because I've done a couple of, what year was this? So I've done a multitude of different courses over the years, mate. But yeah, I think I'd finished my master's in neurolinguistics, and I think at that stage I was in transition in the sense that during the day I was a sales rep, so to speak. But at night I was a mental performance coach. And I tell the story. It's I used to say to clients, they'd say, well, can I see you during the day? And I said, look, I can't because I'm booked out with corporate clients. It was a little white lie. I had a job, but for about 3 years, I would come home from work, have dinner, have a shower, and then go in my office and work sometimes till 9:30 at night. It was a lot of hard work just to get the business going to a point that I could afford to go full time. And they were challenging times. They were challenging times for us both, because I think you and I can both agree too that the traditional mail house, the printing industry was changing dramatically.
Absolutely.
And those that didn't pivot and sort of adapt to a new industry, a new era, were going to be left behind.
Absolutely. We've had to keep pivoting and keep learning with new technologies the whole way through.
But that was, I think the beautiful thing for me is that I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew I was good at it. You probably got a sense of that, and I just, that's the buzz that I get, is working with people and helping them become the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So a mental performance coach, how, I guess you get asked the question a lot of times, what actually is a mental performance coach? And for our listeners, what do you do? What is a mental performance coach?
By definition, I basically help people become the best versions of themselves, overcoming limiting beliefs, giving them a toolbox to deal with stress. I am not a counsellor. I am interested in working fundamentally with leaders, athletes. I mean, I'll name drop a couple of them, and you probably want to talk a little bit about them, but the likes of Israel Adesanya, Lydia I have helped people learn how to run their minds at a very high level. So I've got Olympic gold medals, world champions, I mean, and an international clientele, which is quite humbling when you look at, I operate from a very humble little place in Waterview, Auckland.
Yes. And Lydia Ko, she credits you with her journey to becoming a world #1 athlete. So you had to work on her mind game?
So Lydia came to me, she was 8, and one of the first things I always believe as a coach to work with the end in mind. So and so it's identifying what ultimately it is that you want. And I talk about the importance of a vision board. And you've been in my office, you've seen my little picture that I had of me on stage. And I had drawn that in 1995. Now, on my path to learning and working with athletes, I want to go and pivot all the way back to the beginning fundamentally with a very special man, Clive Litton, who we talk about law of attraction. He was my first coach. And he was unforgiving, very hard, and had very high expectations of me. And I appreciate that. And that is something that I've continued to work with in the way that I approach my coaching with clients. I'm very hard on my clients. I expect a lot of them. I demand a lot from them. But in doing so, I'll do it. I will push buttons. I start the coaching session with a simple question, and that is, do you give me permission to be blunt and honest? Because it's the only way that we can get to the essence of an individual to help them develop and become the best versions of themselves. You can't. You have to acknowledge your weaknesses, so to speak, as well as your strengths, right?
You hold people to account, and you're very direct in your sessions.
Yeah, mate, I don't pull punches.
No, you do not.
It's not my style. It's not my style, and it's certainly not everyone's flavour, and I get that. And I'm unapologetic with that, because fundamentally over 30 years from a very humble little place, I've developed some of the best athletes, not just out of New Zealand, but in the world. So my reputation and my results speak for themselves. As you can appreciate, I don't even advertise. All my business is a referral.
I want to talk about vision boards, because I remember 25 years ago, you said, Brenden, we're going to produce a vision board. And it gives me, it made me pause and really think about what the future looks like. And I want you to talk to me about what is a vision board, and why is it so important in the process of the mental performance?
Well, I think the important thing is, let's understand this from the perspective. One of the most important things is to give yourself permission to clarify what it is you want. That lays out the intention.
Yes.
Then from there, once it's verbalized and visualized, I hold you to attention with attention. Yes. Because when intention and attention align, it affects behavior. So bottom line is we behave our way to success, right? So I want to hold you to account for congruent behavior. But there's something special in having a vision, because it helps you understand your reasons why. It holds you to account, because when you have a vision board, it's almost like the governor. You have it up there on your wall, and every day you see it, and it's sort of like, hey, listen, today, what are your thoughts are, and what is your communication like? What is your behavior? Is it congruent with that? And so there's a wonderful sense of accountability, and it holds. It's like being really honest with yourself. The biggest problem that we have with a lot of people is they procrastinate, or they're incongruent, and they procrastinate. This is one of the ways. It's not the only way, but it's one of the most powerful ways, in my opinion, to hold you to account.
Come back and you can focus on that vision.
Yeah, and I think what it does is it helps you navigate through the noise of life. There's so many flippin' distractions. Your phone, you've got family. And when you're clear, one of the most important things, now we've got to put this into the contents of, say, an entrepreneur or an athlete. One of the most important things to understand is that you need to be able to give yourself permission to say no. You need to stay on track. And there's a multitude of challenges. It's inevitable you're going to go through challenges in life, but you have to be able to, through that conscious awareness, make better decisions, because you can easily be led down a rabbit hole, which is not what you want. So I also teach one of the most important things, which is the virtue of selfishness. You have to be selfish at times. The time for being altruistic, I think, is very important, but at the appropriate time. For an athlete, you need to be focused on the behavior that's congruent with what you want to achieve. You need to be bloody minded. Yes. The second thing that's really important associated with that is this deluded vision that people have, that they're supposed to have balance in their life, which is absolute bullshit. If you really want to achieve some level of greatness, you are not going to have balance.
All in?
There's a little saying, if you want to walk on water, first you got to step out of the boat. So you have to be all in. You have to sacrifice. There are times when it's obviously very challenging, because it's a clash of values and what's important in your life. But I think for most athletes, most of the time, it's when you're clear on the vision, it's very easy to say no. And I think that word's wonderful.
And I think you mentioned sort of like values, and we put together like a eulogy, and I thought that was really interesting. Brenden, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? And I sort of stepped back. I remember this 25 years ago and go, I've never thought about that. And that brings back, like, who do I want to be remembered as? And it really starts to pull in the values discussion. I think maybe the reason you pull that in is because if you haven't got those solid foundational values and how you want to live your life, you can't maybe put those other layers on top of it.
It's almost subconscious, in the sense that if you don't live congruent with your values, you'll feel uneasy, and it can cause stress. It can cause disease. It can cause a number of things. So I think it's absolutely important to identify what those values. And I think maybe for the viewers, it's interesting how we talk about values, but one of the most important things is probably clarifying them. So by definition, a value is a preference times a priority. So we have preferences in our life, and we have priorities. And again, understanding what's the preference and what's the priority helps you stay on track. It helps you make better decisions. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So how I explain it, it's like a value is like a belief system, but on steroids. So it's imagine a big bubble, and then belief systems attach themselves to those values. So we create belief systems that support those values.
What's an example of a couple of values that people might hold?
Yeah, well, I think for me, my number one value is freedom, then family. And people go, wow, that's interesting. I think you value family being number one. But for me, I know that if I live with the freedom that I like, I can work with you, but I'll never work for you. I like the freedom in creating. I mean, for 30 years, Brenden, I pride myself in, one of the things that I've enjoyed is that for 30 years, I have never been woken up by an alarm clock.
Nice.
I have designed my life. Now, with that being said, I've been coaching now for 30 years. I have had only 3 days off sick in 30 years, man.
You're looking after yourself.
I'm looking after, but I think the biggest contributing thing for me is that I don't have a lot of stress in my life. I recognise the fact that I personally, historically, have not dealt with stress particularly well, right? So yes, I can have tools that help deal with the stress because stressful moments arise. But fundamentally, by designing my life, I've eliminated the probability of stimulating any stress. You know, the biggest stresses we have, financial and a number of other health issues. So I'm kind of, cause and effect. I want to be at cause to minimise the effect or minimise any stressful outcomes.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I recall when we first started as well, we created, I call the happiness wheel.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it had a lot of these apexes through it, and it sort of segmented different areas of my life.
Yeah, it was different things that were important for you, your personal health, education, family, social.
Yep. And we could score that on a how do you feel 0 to 10.
Yeah.
And that gave us quite a clear picture on where the balance is. And I know you say that it can't always be balanced.
No.
But it's also helpful to be able to have a view on where you are. And in some cases, I imagine if you work on one area of that, all of those areas in your life will grow.
It pivots you to start looking and asking some questions about truly going back to fundamentally designing your life. I was that guy, going back even further from the coaching when we were in the printing press. I used to get excited about overtime. I was doing a 16-hour shift. Did I have balance? No. Was I happy? God, I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. And, you take a moment of pause and you go, fuck, is this it? Is this my life? Fuck that. Excuse the...
Yeah.
But again, here's the little thing that I talk about, and that is the quality of your life and the quality of your performance is directly related to the quality of the questions you ask of yourself and others. So I started asking myself a better question. Now, on that journey, you can imagine, I still have little stories of people thought I was an idiot. I left school at 16.
Yes.
With no qualifications. I didn't discover till later in life that I'm dyslexic. And so I sort of at that stage identified as a relatively dumb guy. I was seen as this dumb big thug. I mean, I'm pulling trucks and doing a little bit of side work on the door, nightclubs and shit to make a bit of extra money. And I kind of identified with that myself. And then I had to, this is why you start challenging yourself. Now at 20 was when I discovered, 2021, I discovered I'm dyslexic. That was the gift.
Yes.
Because I don't like labels, so I didn't want to use dyslexia as an excuse, and a lot of people can. No excuses. But I used the understanding of that to learn how to fundamentally read and write again in my 20s, which opened a door for me to a point now where I do admit to the fact that I've got an addiction to books.
You love reading?
Yeah, man. I have a wonderful addiction, something that I never had before. And maybe on this point, I think for me personally, there were 3 key things that I wanted to overcome in my life. Number 1 was the bullying. So at Wesley College, the bullying was the big catalyst for me. I didn't like, it was interesting, you got to a point I can handle the hiding, but I didn't like what I was feeling. It was like I'm giving my power away.
Yes.
And I made a promise to myself that was never going to happen again. That's what stimulated me to get into the gym.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So, New Zealand Strongman competitor and 7 years undefeated as a powerlifting champ. So that transformed me physically. Now, on that journey, I realized that the physical's important, but there was another dimension that was untapped, which was the mental. That really opened doors for me.
Yes.
So from overcoming the bullying, the next stage for me was overcoming the public speaking, something that you and I both
absolutely
had to overcome. And in fact, in my office, you probably can remember the picture that I drew, my vision of me on stage with
a lot of beautiful
with
lights, colours behind you, 1,000 audience.
And that's been manifested now. Well, when you think podcasts and seminars over 30, I don't know, hundreds. I've done it.
We talk about like self-limiting beliefs. And we worked on affirmations.
Absolutely.
I know they're a very powerful tool that you use with a lot of clients. And for our listeners, can you break down an affirmation? What is it? What makes it so powerful? And how does it actually work in the brain? How does it actually move us forward?
So first and foremost, it's identifying. So Carl Jung said this: where fear lies, there lies your task. So you cannot change anything you don't first acknowledge. So you acknowledge what your limiting belief is.
Yes.
Now this is a lot of people.
There's a lot of truth finding to get to that point,
mate,
right?
You have to. You got to get down to bedrock, right?
Yes.
And it's scary.
Yes.
It's scary because the ego is going to be fighting you every part of the way, going, no, you can't dig that in. No, that's enough, right? But there's an emotional, beautiful moment of acknowledgement in a way that now that I've acknowledged it, now I can start the construction. Okay. So affirmations alone aren't going to make a massive difference, but combined with action steps, combined with a number of other things, it complements it beautifully.
Yes.
And again, it's very important. One of the things I talk about is mind your language. So your representation of the world, because it's almost subconscious. We'll say, oh, you dumbass, and believe me, I'm not perfect. I still catch myself at moments, So let's just say I have a fear of public speaking. We'll use that as an example. So for me, I want an affirmation that has to be powerful, and it needs to be written in the present of what you want to create, right? So for instance, I get anxious about public speaking. So the affirmation, now a couple of key things is in the construction and the visual representation. So a little bit of NLP. So I'd say, when you think of being incredibly confident, what colour is confidence for you?
Yellow.
Brilliant. So you have the affirmations printed in yellow, obviously black background, whatever, right? And those things, I want you consciously speaking them, right?
Yes.
So the affirmation is the absolute extreme opposite of what the belief is. So every time I open my mouth, My whole body gets excited.
People love what I have to say.
Everyone loves what I have to say.
Yeah.
The more I speak, the more confident I become. So you start creating these. Now with that verbalization, then you start the process of visualizing yourself in that moment. That visualization with that affirmation, what you've got to appreciate is the subconscious mind has no idea of reality or time.
Okay.
It only knows now. So in that moment, you present you've got a limiting belief, then you've got this wonderful affirmation with the visual cue, and the brain doesn't know the difference between reality or time. So it's got a choice now. Now, the brain loves drugs. It loves drugs, and it loves dopamine, most of all, right?
Yes.
So you've got these two things presented, and the neurotransmitters and the neurobiology, all those connections in the brain, right? Fundamentally, it's about competition.
Yes.
The one with the biggest pulse, the biggest power wins, right? It connects with another neuron, connects throughout the whole brain. So it's a competition. Now, dopamine wins
Every time.
pretty much every time, right?
Yeah.
So the brain then goes, I like this, right?
Yes.
And over a period of time of exercise of this, it starts to become more dominant in the neuroplasticity of the brain than the negative one. This one becomes fundamentally extinct. The connections that we have, so that's from a biological perspective. The next thing is that it starts then changing your perception and language. The other thing you've got to appreciate about the brain is that it's a predictive machine. So we all have this bias. So if you're saying, I hate this, it will find evidence to prove that bias.
Got you.
So as you overcome that and rewire the brain now goes, hey, that's most like me.
So it's looking for more of it, and it's attracting it
law
to
of
itself.
attraction. Yes, it's confirmation.
Yeah.
And so eventually the affirmation itself becomes extinct.
Yeah, got you. Yeah.
Now,
Because you don't need it anymore.
No,
and then
you
you'll
don't,
look for a new one.
because put it to you this way: have you ever? A lot of viewers will probably have a situation where you've really thought about a wonderful car that you really want.
Yes.
The day comes, you hand over the cash, you get your car, you start driving it. What do you start seeing more of? The same bloody car.
Yes.
It's law of attraction. So the brain is a predictive machine. Now, you've also got to appreciate the brain is a fuzzy machine, right? So if we learn how to run our brain more effectively, you can create, attract, behave your way to success.
Yes. And so within the toolbox, affirmations are critical things.
With the vision board,
with the
affirmation.
Yep.
So I just want to, here's an example. So a wonderful guy, as an example, Michael Hendry, who's one of our top golfers. Now, Michael has had probably the biggest win of his life in the sense that he had to battle cancer. And he's overcome it. He's won. I'm proud of the guy for that. It was a tough battle for him and his family. But I go all the way back. So probably, I can't remember when, a long time ago, Michael came to me as a struggling professional. And we sat down and we did some affirmations. Now, Michael's the sort of guy, everything he does 100%.
Yes.
So when I say write an affirmation and put it on your fridge, he took that, laminated it, he put it in the shower, he put it everywhere, right?
Put it in the shower, Dave.
He laminated it in the shower because you think you have time by yourself, you can visualise.
Yeah, his whole family got the benefit of
No,
his
you've got to
affirmation.
appreciate, this is going back when he wasn't even married, right?
Yes.
So this was before he even had family, right? So he's just he may have been with his girlfriend at the time who became his wife, but he was a young guy who was just had this vision of turning pro, right?
Yes.
And I'm not too sure financially how, but let's just say it was from day to day sort of living. And one of the affirmations is, I'm $1 million a year golfer. And at that point, you know, when we write that, there's going to be a part of you that goes, what a load of bullshit, man, this is crazy. And that's a sure sign that you're on the right track.
Yes.
Right? Yep. Because your brain is predictive. So it's got history. It's history. And
self-doubt's having a chat.
Yeah, it's going, hey, listen, you got no evidence of that, pal. You can't prove, we're gonna come back to correction. Well, Michael has done just that. Now, here's something that was really interesting when we talk about the vision board. He had a thing for Aston Martins. And his ultimate dream was to provide for his family, as he, you know, but he wanted an Aston Martin, and eventually he got one.
Fantastic.
But what was freaky, we caught up for a New Year's Eve party, and he had just been sponsored by Aston Martin.
Oh, amazing.
And we were sitting at the table because Aston Martin for the next year asked him, design your car, because it's easily done. So the mags, the colour, the leather, the everything.
Yes.
And we're sitting there designing this Aston Martin, and he looks at me and he goes, "You've got to be careful what you think about, eh?" Because we went from owning it to being sponsored every year. Got a new Aston Martin. Crazy,
he's
man.
Manifested his
It's
Aston
gone
Martin.
beyond what he initially envisioned.
That's the power right there, eh?
Man, honestly, he had. I think the biggest battle, like I said, he overcoming his cancer. But we had very blunt conversations. But mindset.
This would have helped him on his journey through the cancer journey?
It helped him stay on track with his focus. Look, there are no guarantees in life, but you know, I think mindset, I think any medical doctor would say that still to this day, you know, the placebo still really does perform well. The power of thought and perception, I think, is a contributing factor. I think the other key thing for him is that he was prepared for the fight.
Yes.
He had 2 beautiful daughters and a wife, and he's still young. Yep. You know, he's a fighter. So you know, I love the guy. I'm so proud of him. Yeah. When I get the message from him, you know, it's one of those tear breakers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very special.
And talking about fighters, Israel Adesanya.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about, you know, he's in the cage.
Yep.
He's about to go into battle. Thinking about Lydia, she's about to take a shot, make or break.
Yep.
How do they get into state for those moments where, you know, a normal human being could just fall apart, or it's just like so much pressure on?
Yeah.
What are the tools you provide?
Okay. Well, there's a multi-pronged attack to this. First and foremost, the biggest teacher is time under tension. You know, it's not about. So we look at lids in that moment through that lens and go, God, that's amazing. But you go back to an 8-year-old who at 10 o'clock at night has already hit hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of balls. And Lydia is a prime example, you know, go back to the questions she would ask. Poor Tina's there, tired, cold, wanting to go home. That's her mum. Beautiful parents. And Tina would go, all right, that's it, we're going now. And Lydia would ask one question. Can I just hit one more? And she'd hit one more. What do you think she'd ask again?
One more, please.
Can I just hit one more?
Yeah.
So that combined with playing as many tournaments as possible. Now, again, we've got to appreciate this. Lydia, to a certain point, was a freak in the sense that at a very young age, she knew exactly what she wanted. Now, I encourage most parents of kids, let your kids go and play different sports because it's healthy for their neurology and their physiology, right? They build different skills. But occasionally you meet someone who knows exactly what they want.
Yes.
Now that in of itself, it was part of the gift. So in the moment when we're looking at the US Open and she's got this 12-foot sliding putt, it's, I don't know, she's done that time after time for tens, millions of freaking practice. So first and foremost, it's time under tension.
Yes.
Right? So she had the behaviour, the fundamental habit of hard work. Bottom line, you have to be a hard-working individual, right? Hence why, did she have balance? No. I still remember with Lydia, the challenge she had. She was at Pinehurst, she had study, and she wouldn't complain. She'd go home and do her homework, sometimes to 12:30 in the morning, and get up and still go to school. We knew that we had something special, and I remember having to go in there and have a little chat to the principal of Pinehurst and say, listen, can we just back off the... I get it for some of the other kids going on into employment, but this girl will never have to worry about an education for employment.
Yes.
Lydia's destined to be a multi-millionaire in her own right.
Yeah, she was on a journey already.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. So let's pivot back to what you were saying. So first and foremost, some of the things with the toolbox for time under tension. Israel fought probably twice a week in China.
You don't see that.
You don't see that.
No.
You know, so what's done in the dark will shine in the light.
Yes.
You know, you have to be tenacious with your vision. Remember, bottom line is we behave our way to success.
Yes.
We don't just intend it. You know, any kid that I have kids saying to me, I hit 100 balls, and I go, okay, so I'm going to give you a frame of reference. How many? Do you feel satisfied with that? Oh yeah. And I said, well, do you want a frame of reference? Do you know how many balls Lydia would? And then even if you were to say, look, Lydia probably between 300 balls a day to probably 1,000 sometimes. And it's insignificant in the first week. But if you take that for 8 years, how many more balls has she had?
Micro improvements happening.
What's the word? Compounding interest.
Yes.
You know? Okay. So the second thing is you got to appreciate it's all about perception too. So for the average person looking at going into a fight, I don't know how they do it. Well, if you were, say, a carpenter and you've been doing it for 30 years, you'd be pretty easy, right? So time under tension, a lot of training. Yes. Okay. The other thing is that these guys get to a point where they have an undoubtable belief in self. And they've got the evidence because, they're fine-tuning their craft to get to the point that they're confirming it through the wins, right? But they also have the ability to learn fundamentally from their failures. It's the failures of the gift. I was winning the fight. Then he threw a feint, I reacted, and he landed something. Right, big learning for me. Okay, so they're always learning. You've got to be curious. The other thing is I talk about altered state.
Yes.
So for me, they become more than all their parts. Now, it's all different in application of requirement. For Israel, so when Israel came to me, it was probably early 2015, he'd lost a couple of fights. He didn't even have a UFC contract. And we went and did the vision board. Again, this is a guy who doesn't do things by half. He got one of his mates to superimpose the UFC Middleweight champion belt around him. He didn't even have a UFC contract. I tell the story. The story is I'm running a seminar for City Kickbox with all the fighters, and Mike Angrove, who's one of the great coaches there, says, look, guys, can I just tell you a little story? Because I'm talking about the importance of the vision board. And he goes, Dave, can I tell you the story? So they train 3 times a day. He comes home, tippy-toeing into the house. Izzy's staying with him, and he knows he's probably having a snooze. So he tiptoes past his bedroom, And there's Izzy at the end of his bed looking up at this picture, whispering, I'm the middleweight champion of the world. Middleweight champion of the world. Visualizing, seeing that moment.
And
affirmating, yeah. What year was it? Probably 4 or 5 years later, it was reality. So any thought that I continuously hold in my mind will soon seek expression through some practical means.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's the power of vision. I mean, what in the vision board, a picture's worth 1,000 words, man. It's powerful, and it stimulates that vision board, then stimulates imagination. You know, you start imagining that moment. Now, with that, Izzy, so we're talking to Izzy, and again, for me, I'm always assessing physiology, verbalization, all the different cues. And we started talking, and then we started talking about the style bender thing. Just general conversation. But you can see this change in this physiology.
You like that?
Physiology is biggie for me, right? Okay. And I said, let's play with that. I want you to put that on right now. If you're a style bender, what do you think and feel? And he goes, I'm just fearless. I have no fear, which allows me to be calm in that moment. And when you're calm in that moment, what he said, it was a time distortion. He actually felt like he was milliseconds ahead of his opponent. Now in the fight game, the difference between landing a punch and it just clipping is big.
Yes.
So if you're half a second ahead of your opponent, that's a big advantage. So in the contents of UFC fighters, a lot of the boys, I've got a young lad now, he's destined to probably move on to be heavyweight champion as Bear. He's the big boy coming out of City Kickbox. He's a big unit.
Yes.
And again,
heavyweight?
Yep, heavyweight. Same thing. He sees himself more than all his parts, right?
Yes.
So basically, it's sort of like, in this case, it's not about faking it to making it. It's about faking it to superimpose or to empower it. To take all the parts that you already have and then light it up to another level of performance. And these guys, for Izzy, you put one on your chin, mate, you're gone.
It's like buying a suit and then moving into it.
It's being the Superman. So what I teach is transition. So I talk about calm, happy, and then Superman. And the whole Superman concept for me was based on Nietzsche's Übermensch, which I love Nietzsche. I love his philosophy.
Tell me a bit about that.
Well, Nietzsche wasn't talking about in the contents of performance for a UFC fighter, but he talked about a transition. So Nietzsche talked about 3 fundamental transitions. The first, where most people get stuck, and so we're pivoting away from sport now into more of a life. So Nietzsche talked about 3 transitions. The first transitions are where most people stay, and that is the camel. And the camel carries heavy load. It will say yes to the dragon. The dragon's what society dictates, right? And the dragon, you know, he talks about the scales on the dragon. Every scale on the dragon is thou shalt, you know, command from the dragon. And so the camel says yes to the dragon and lives a life less than the one they deserve. Now, in order to break free, to ultimately create what you want, you first have to go through the first transition, which is that of the lion. And the lion has the courage to say no to what society and what the dragon dictates. And it starts to create their own values, their own beliefs, creating their own vision. And then the last transition is that of the child, which seems ironic.
Back to front, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But a child, man, look at how a child approaches the world. They haven't been stained by society.
Yeah.
You know, they're wonderful, they're curious, they're loving. You know, to be the child is to really understand the beauty of life.
Yes. Because we seem to get layers.
We get conditioned.
Yeah.
We get triggered all the time. I mean, the biggest problem we have today, I think, fundamentally, is social media. We got bombarded with so much information. Now, I think that's part of the challenge. Is one of the things actually that comes from fighting is one of the most profound things is protect yourself at all times. Norm Chomsky talked about this back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and he wrote a book, Manufacturing Consent, and he talked about how the media was very influential on us, and we had a distorted perception of reality, how it can manipulate. Well, that era is long gone, and today we have bombarded with these mobile phones. Media now has gone from sort of a state-owned organisation. I mean, podcasts. You got so much information, and the challenge is that it becomes overwhelming for people. I think people get triggered and stressed, and I think the other thing is the justified information, the quality of information, everything, is how do we navigate through the minefield of misinformation and disinformation.
Yes, and become and maintain our authentic selves as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it's so important to stand fast with your own values. That's not to say that some of them can change over time, because you're constantly evolving, especially with your thinking. But that's part of the personal responsibility. How I sort of navigate through that, you know, just little things. The one thing that I've enjoyed for 30 years is I wake up not to an alarm clock, but to the sun streaming through the window.
Yes.
And I start my day with breakfast with my wife.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Just, it's about me and Joe. It's about what we want to create, because I think you can get overwhelmed and worrying about things that, yes, they're important, but I do think we need to clean our own home first. I think too many people use as an excuse to fight on other fronts when their own lives are in.
Bring those values and your virtues to the home and your family, and keep it tight. Be
the change you want to see in this world. It starts with responsibility for the individual and the immediate environment they're in. You know, keep a clean home.
Absolutely.
You know, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is make my bed.
Yes. Yep.
It's an accomplishment.
It's a starting point for the
day. It's
how you're going to deliver your day.
It's very important that. Look, I get it. It's important to be sort of in tune with events, but not to the point where it starts to contaminate your world.
Dave, one of the things that you taught me, and as a quote I use all the time with my kids, best of intention, let go of the outcome. Yeah,
I think that's really important, because basically, what can cause a lot of stress in your life, especially for athletes, and with that, entrepreneurs and others, is the stress response that's created through expectations. Now, there's a wonderful formula that I use, and I'll credit to a wonderful man called Charles Tibbetts, who was a great therapist in America. He's long gone now. But he talked about the formula of BICE: belief plus imagination plus conviction plus expectation equals results. Now, as you navigate through that, so again, you've got to go back to those core beliefs and go, right, some of them, a belief in of itself is something I hope is true. So they can be changed and they need to be challenged. The next is imagination. Setting your intentions, right? Yes. What's the vision? Conviction is holding you to account for the appropriate behaviour. And in the time frame leading to, you have to have expectations that hold you to account for all those things. But in the contents of performance, for instance, so I always say, leave your expectations in the car if you're about to go to a rugby game or a fight or whatever, all the changing rooms. Because if you hold on to those expectations, but those expectations served you to hold you to account with the things you needed to do to prepare for it, but we need to be in the appropriate state of flow. And that means that expectations can actually cause you to try too hard.
Yes.
And when you try too hard, you're too robotic. You're not in the flow state. Again, go back to what Niethe said. Kids have imagination. They have flow.
They're playful.
They're playful, right?
Yes.
Now, I've had this with fighters going, I'll guarantee you some of the best fights you had is not when they were in the ring, but you were mucking around with some of your mates and you were tagging them every time. The guy's getting pissed off and he goes, yeah, because it didn't matter. Correct. So when you become aware of that and you can get yourself into that state of calm, focused attention and how become more than all your parts by tapping into that super ego, man, that's powerful stuff. To go into the ring and be and again, for a lot of people can really struggle to understand this. To go into the ring and be fearless, absolutely without fear.
Yes. And turn up ready to be in the moment.
The preparation's done. The physical's taken care of.
So
it's about execution.
It's the input, it's the execution.
It's about the execution.
The outcome will be the outcome.
Yeah, I'll have the best. I can trust the fact that I've done all that I can because there are no guarantees in life. All I can guarantee is that I've brought forth the best version of me. And that's all you can ask of yourself.
And the outcome, no matter what way it goes, it's always a lesson.
Absolutely. There's no failure in life. There's only feedback. And if you get the feedback loop going, you're looking for refinement. But even with a lot of my athletes, they will then pivot afterwards and be critical. Even though they won, there's still diamonds in that critical analysis. Because the conviction is to become the best version of themselves.
Which is a continuous journey.
Mate, it's a journey that will never be fully actualized because you'll run out of time.
Beautiful, Dave.
That's the journey, bro.
That's a beautiful journey to be on.
It is, man.
Dave, you've recently written a book, The Winning Mindset.
Yep.
What would readers take from the book? Like we've covered off a lot today, a lot of tools. I've read the book. It's a beautiful book. Took it to New York with me to ensure that it was going to be a New York bestseller. I love the book. What would a reader take from the book?
I think first and foremost, the simplicity of it. I was very clear that I didn't want it to be some academic. I want it so that a 7-year-old could read this and take something away. So I'm not trying to be some sort of academic here. I just want simple principles that are applicable for everyday life.
Really practical.
And really practical and simple.
A lot of the things we spoke about, a lot of the things that you took me through, sitting in that book, and you can just really, it sort of steps you through how you can implement them in your life. And just get up and
that's it. The gift is in the simplicity, because with simplicity comes application. With application affects behaviour. Bottom line is we behave our way to success. So there's no excuses. I've made it so damn simple that a 7-year-old could read this and apply this.
Yeah, fantastic. There's no excuses then?
No, it's about having the right, it's about having that winning mindset, mate. And none of these are uniquely mine. There's a few things that I have developed, but these are simple, universal principles. Probably just written in a way that has been made simple to understand.
I think at the end of the day, we're always standing on someone else's shoulders, and we're just
Absolutely.
giving it our little bit of edge.
Yeah, we're refining things. Yeah. I've had some great mentors. As I mentioned before, Clive, who he only passed this year, which I was gutted because he was a very, very special man for me. But there was a number of individuals in my life that were very influential on me. Without a doubt, the two most important were my granddad and my Uncle John.
And I know you passed those stories through actually in your writing here as well.
I just there was something. They were manly men. Do you know what I mean? They were gentlemen. I remember my granddad would always, the way he would treat grandma. He was a romantic. For 60 years they were married or whatever it was. He would always buy her flowers and chocolate on a Friday, right? But you know what was just as beautiful? Every Friday, Grandma would be surprised.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Well, Dave, I think I really appreciate your time today, mate.
Oh, pleasure, mate.
It's fantastic to see you. It's nice to be able to sit and talk like this.
Yeah.
Normally, I'm in the seat being interviewed. Before we wrap for the day, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we sort of bring today's interview to a close?
Well, I would say go and take a moment so you're uninterrupted and assess the rest of your life and think, if I could not fail, what would I attempt to do? Write it down and put it into a goal and action it. Yeah. Find your bliss, man.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. It's been a brilliant conversation.
Yeah, pleasure.
Where will people find you?
If they want to find me, they'll find me, mate. I don't advertise, I don't proclaim to go to my website. If you are interested in working with me, you will find me.
All right. David Niethe.
Pleasure. Thanks for your time, mate.
Appreciate it, mate.
See you, mate.
Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thanks for watching, and feel free to connect with me on my socials. If there's anything you'd like to ask at any time, you can also contact me on brenden.ralston@actionhq.co. Until next time, stay connected, be creative, and enjoy your day.